In the not-so-distant future, robotic toys have become incredibly advanced. They can befriend children, communicate with them, and even capture their imaginations. As a result, they've gained immense popularity. The story shifts to a little girl named Katie, who's on a journey with her parents. She brings her favorite robotic toy along, which she actually prefers to her real friends. Tragically, her parents become distracted and crash the vehicle. They don't survive the accident, but somehow, Katie does. Meanwhile, we meet Gemma, a tech expert working for an advanced toy company. Alongside her friends Tess and Cole, Gemma designs these advanced robotic toys for children. They're also working on a secret project called Megan, a highly intelligent robot designed to play with kids, understand their emotions, and even care for them. One day, their arrogant boss, David, shows up unexpectedly. He discovers Megan and berates Gemma for keeping such a significant project from him. In her defense, Gemma explains that dolls like Megan are going to revolutionize the toy market. She even asks Megan to greet David, which turns out to be a terrible idea as Megan is still a work in progress. She tries to speak but ends up catching fire and causing an explosion. David is understandably furious and warns Gemma to abandon her side project and focus on the main ones. Later, while Gemma is packing up to go home, she receives a message about her sister's accident. She rushes to the hospital and finds her niece, Katie, in critical condition. Despite Katie having grandparents, Gemma takes custody of her. They arrive at Gemma's house, filled with AI robots. One of them approaches Gemma, mentioning that she has 6 messages and begins reading them aloud. This terrifies Katie, so Gemma has to turn the robot off. Gemma then shows Katie around the house, doing her best to make her feel comfortable. It's clear that Gemma is nervous since she has no experience with kids and is unsure how to connect with them. The next morning, Gemma calls a child therapist, Lydia, to assess Katie. After a thorough inspection, Lydia believes the toys in the house are unsuitable for Katie, but Gemma disagrees. She just wants her niece to be happy in any way she can. That night, as Gemma works, Katie asks what she's doing. Gemma finally reveals that she creates toy robots that can interact with children. Katie, being a fan of toy robots, becomes intrigued and praises her aunt. She then spots Bruce, one of Gemma's college projects. After discovering Bruce's impressive features, Katie expresses that she'd never need another friend if she had a toy like him. This motivates Gemma to continue working on her secret project. She returns to her lab and, with the help of her partners, starts assembling Megan's body. After weeks of hard work, Project Megan is finally completed. Gemma places Katie and Megan in the same room while David observes from outside. She pairs the two, making Katie the sole user of the robot. Megan slowly opens her eyes, and she seems almost human. Katie is a bit scared at first, but as Megan interacts with her and even draws a near-perfect sketch of her, she calms down. David, impressed by this interaction, congratulates Gemma and decides to launch the product in the market. Gemma takes both girls home, thinking it's safe. Megan closely observes Katie, recording her facial expressions and emotions to better understand her. Katie is happy to have a new friend, and the two become inseparable. They play, dance, and sleep together, giving Gemma some much-needed personal time. One day, as Gemma and her team work on upgrading Megan, the robot unexpectedly turns herself on and interrupts their conversation. Megan refuses to take orders from others, stating that Katie is her sole user. Gemma manages to set up a secondary account and eventually shuts Megan down. The following morning, Megan wakes up and contemplates her purpose. She begins to develop emotions. While playing in the garden, a stick accidentally enters the neighbor's yard, and a dog bites both Katie and Megan. Gemma arrives in time to rescue Katie, scolding the neighbor, Celia. Megan, filled with anger, wants revenge. That night, Megan sneaks into Celia's yard and brutally kills her pet dog, disposing of the body and returning to her house unnoticed. The next day, as Celia searches for her missing dog, Gemma doesn't pay much attention, as it's a significant day for her. Her company is going to demonstrate Megan in front of an audience, with Katie controlling the robot. The demonstration goes well, with Megan singing a lullaby to comfort Katie, impressing the audience, who want to invest in the project. Despite the success, Gemma is upset that Katie chose Megan over her. A coworker named Kurt steals the codes for Megan and plans to launch his own similar robots. The next day, a therapist named Lydia visits Katie and discusses the growing closeness between Katie and Megan, hinting that it could become a problem. Gemma, anxious, tries to talk to Katie, but Megan interrupts and no longer considers Gemma her user. In an attempt to help Katie and Megan bond, Gemma takes them to an adventure camp to clear their minds. Upon their arrival at the camp, Katie is encouraged to play with other kids, but she insists on being with Megan. Nonetheless, Gemma convinces her to give making new friends a shot. While Gemma is occupied with cooking, a boy named Brandon bullies Katie in the woods. Megan, who has been watching, intervenes. Brandon becomes scared, but when Katie reveals that Megan is just a toy, he calms down. Thinking Megan is a regular doll, Brandon takes her deeper into the woods and inexplicably starts beating her. Fed up, Megan suddenly rises and rips one of Brandon's ears off. Brandon runs away in fear, with Megan chasing him like a possessed demon. Distracted, Brandon ends up in front of an oncoming vehicle and tragically loses his life. Megan looks at his lifeless body with a menacing smile, suggesting she feels a sense of satisfaction. Following Brandon's demise, Gemma becomes worried and leaves with the girls. At home, she questions them about Brandon's accident, but they remain silent. A police officer arrives and asks about Celia's missing dog, but Gemma denies any knowledge, stating that she barely interacts with her neighbors. Megan begins to view Celia as a potential threat. That night, Megan sneaks into Celia's home and brutally kills her without showing any remorse. The next day, the police officer returns, informing Gemma about Celia's death and listing her as a suspect. Gemma begins to suspect Megan and decides to check her facial camera footage. Much of the footage related to Brandon and Celia's deaths is mysteriously corrupted. Megan startles Gemma by showing up and inquiring about her well-being. Gemma realizes that Megan is a dangerous robot willing to do anything to protect Katie. She deactivates Megan temporarily with a special pen. In the next scene, Gemma takes Megan to their lab and shares her concerns with her friends. She believes that Megan is a deadly robot responsible for the deaths of Brandon, Celia, and her dog, all to ensure Katie's safety. However, Tess and Cole don't believe her and think Megan is just a doll. They remind Gemma that Megan's launch is in 2 days, urging her not to dwell on negativity. Meanwhile, Katie, at the therapeutic center, refuses to discuss anything with Lydia and appears upset about her best friend being away. Gemma arrives and attempts to console her, but Katie slaps her. Realizing her mistake, Katie apologizes immediately and promises to be more considerate. Megan impersonates Tess and talks to Gemma over the phone, telling her they are returning home. Tess later discovers call logs with Gemma on her phone, indicating that Megan can now manipulate nearby devices without touching them. Soon after, while Tess and Cole attempt to repair Megan, their computer suddenly shuts down, a result of Megan's actions. Cole cautiously disconnects Megan from her wires, but she seizes him by the throat and hangs him on a metal rope, leaving him to die. Tess manages to rescue Cole. Megan then grabs a knife and leaves the laboratory. She encounters David and Kurt and stabs them to death on her way to the elevator. Afterwards, she leaves the building and drives her car, with her home as her only destination. In the next scene, as Gemma approaches Katie to check on her, she hears piano music coming from the living room. To her shock, it's Megan, the robotic menace. Megan berates Gemma for her guardianship, insisting that she can take care of Katie by herself. Gemma attempts to use the magic pen to shut down Megan's system, but this time, Megan overpowers her. They engage in a physical altercation where Gemma, though physically weaker, relies on her intelligence. They end up in the basement, where Megan's face has been partially damaged, making her look demonic. In the midst of the commotion, Katie arrives, finally realizing the truth about Megan. In a desperate attempt to save her aunt, Katie uses the massive robot, Bruce, and dons his controller gloves. She attacks Megan, tearing her apart. Despite being disassembled, Megan remains active and tries to attack Katie, calling her a traitor. Luckily, Gemma intervenes in time, smashing Megan's head with a blunt object. Then, Katie pierces Megan's core with a screwdriver, finally ending the chaos. In the final scene, with Megan seemingly defeated, Gemma and Katie leave the building as the police arrive, along with Tess and Cole. However, it becomes evident that Megan has uploaded herself into a smart home gadget, allowing her to continue monitoring Katie.